My name is Billy, and I'm a curious child. One day, I was home alone when I discovered a secret passage in my house. I was exploring the attic when I noticed a loose brick in the wall. I pried it open and found a hidden passageway. I was excited to explore the passageway, so I crawled inside. It was dark and narrow, but I kept going. After a few minutes, I reached a door at the end of the passageway. I opened the door and found myself in a dusty old room. The room was filled with strange and ancient artifacts.
I spent hours exploring the room, marveling at the strange and wonderful things I saw. I found old books, paintings, and statues. I even found a few weapons and pieces of armor. I was so engrossed in my exploration that I didn't notice the time passing. When I finally looked at my watch, I realized that it was getting late. I knew that my parents would be home soon, so I needed to get back to my room. I started to head back down the passageway, but then I heard a noise. I stopped and listened. The noise was coming from the back of the room.
I slowly turned around and saw a figure standing in the doorway. The figure was tall and thin, with long white hair. It was wearing a long black cloak. I was terrified. I had never seen anything like it before. The figure started to walk towards me. I backed away, but the figure kept coming closer. I turned and ran down the passageway, but the figure was faster. It grabbed me from behind and pulled me to the ground. I tried to fight back, but the figure was too strong. The figure held me down and looked into my eyes. "Don't worry," the figure said.
"I'm not going to hurt you." The figure's eyes were black and empty. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. The figure leaned in and whispered in my ear. "I've been waiting for you," the figure said. The figure stood up and walked away. I lay on the ground, frozen with fear. I didn't know what to think. What had just happened? I slowly got to my feet and ran back down the passageway. I didn't stop running until I reached my room. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I sat on my bed and tried to calm down. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who or what the figure was. I decided to tell my parents about what had happened, but when they came home, I couldn't bring myself to tell them. I was afraid of what they would think. I went to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the figure. I had nightmares about the figure all night long. The next day, I went back to the attic to try to find the secret passageway again, but it was gone. I searched the entire attic, but I couldn't find any sign of it. I was starting to think that I had imagined the whole thing, but then I found the loose brick in the wall again. I pried it open, but the passageway was gone. The brick wall was solid. I knew that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. The secret passageway had been real. But where had it gone? And who was the figure in the black cloak?
Next story.
I'm a college student, and I live in a small apartment off campus. One day, my roommate went out of town for the weekend, so I was home alone. I was excited to have the apartment to myself. I could relax and do whatever I wanted. I spent the day watching TV, eating junk food, and playing video games. That evening, I decided to make myself some dinner. I was cooking pasta when I heard a noise. I turned around and saw a figure standing in the doorway. The figure was a woman. She was wearing a long, white dress. Her hair was long and black, and her eyes were pale white. I was terrified. I had never seen anything like it before. The woman smiled at me. "Hello?" she said. I couldn't speak. I was frozen with fear. "My name is Emily," the woman said. "I used to live in this apartment." I didn't know what to say. "I'm glad to see that you're taking care of my place," Emily said. I nodded. "I'm going to go now," Emily said, "but I'll be back." Emily turned and walked away. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened.
I thought that I had imagined the whole thing, but then I saw a white feather on the floor. I picked up the feather and examined it. It was real. I knew that I hadn't imagined Emily. She was a ghost. I went to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emily. I was afraid of what she might do. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone playing the piano. I got up and went to the living room. Emily was sitting at the piano, playing a beautiful melody. I stopped and listened. Emily's music was mesmerizing.
Emily finished playing and turned to face me. "Hello," she said. "Good morning," I said. "I hope you slept well," Emily said. "I didn't sleep very well," I said. "I was thinking about you." Emily smiled. "Why were you thinking about me?" she asked. "I was afraid of you," I said. Emily's smile faded. "You don't have to be afraid of me," she said. "I'm not going to hurt you." "Why are you here?" I asked. "I'm here because I miss this place," Emily said. "I used to live here with my husband and children. We were very happy here." "What happened to you?" I asked.
"I died in a car accident," Emily said. "My husband and children also died." I was so sorry to hear that. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's okay," Emily said. "I'm at peace now, but I still miss my family." "I can understand that," I said. Emily stood up and walked towards me. She put her hand on my shoulder. "Thank you for letting me stay here," she said. "I'm grateful for your kindness." Emily turned and walked away. I watched her go. I knew that Emily was a ghost, but I didn't feel afraid of her anymore. I felt sorry for her.
I spent the rest of the weekend with Emily. We talked and laughed together. She told me stories about her life, and I told her stories about mine. I started to think of Emily as a friend. On Sunday evening, it was time for Emily to go. "I'm going to miss you," I said. "I'm going to miss you too," Emily said. "But I know that I have to go." Emily hugged me. "Goodbye," she said. "Goodbye, Emily," I said. Emily turned and walked away. I watched her go, and then I went back to my room. I was sad to see Emily go,
but I knew that she was at peace.
I'll never forget the weekend I spent with Emily. She taught me a lot about life and death. And she taught me that even ghosts can be friends.
Next story.
My parents had gone out to dinner and a movie, leaving me home alone. I was 10 years old at the time, and I was excited to have the house to myself. I spent the evening watching TV, eating junk food, and playing video games. I was having a great time, but then I started to notice strange things. I kept seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, and I kept hearing noises coming from empty rooms. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself that I was just imagining things, but the more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. I started to see the shadows more often, and the noises became louder and more distinct. I was starting to get scared. I decided to go to bed early. I figured that if I closed my eyes and went to sleep, I would forget about all of the strange things that were happening. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the shadows and the noises. I was terrified. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. I turned on the light and got a glass of water. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. I told myself that there was nothing to be afraid of. But then I saw it. There was a shadow moving in the corner of the kitchen. I watched in horror as the shadow grew larger and larger. The shadow took the form of a tall, thin man. He was wearing a long black coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was hidden in the shadows. The man started to walk towards me. I backed away, but the man kept coming closer. I turned and ran out of the kitchen. I ran down the hallway and into my bedroom. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I backed away from the door and looked around my room. I was shaking with fear. I heard the man laughing outside my door. "You can't hide from me forever," he said. I crawled into bed and hid under the covers. I held my breath and waited. I waited for hours, but the man never came into my room. I finally fell asleep, but I was haunted by nightmares all night long. I woke up the next morning feeling exhausted. I went to the kitchen and made myself a bowl of cereal. I was sitting at the kitchen table, eating my cereal, when I saw the man again. He was standing in the doorway, watching me. I screamed and dropped my bowl of cereal. The man laughed. "I told you that you couldn't hide from me forever," he said. The man started to walk towards me. I turned and ran out of the kitchen. I ran down the hallway and out the front door. I ran all the way to my neighbor's house and rang the doorbell. My neighbor answered the door. "What's wrong?" she asked. "There's a man in my house," I said. "He's trying to get me." My neighbor's eyes widened in fear. "Come inside," she said. I went inside and told my neighbor what had happened. My neighbor called the police. The police came to my house and searched it, but they couldn't find the man. The police told me that I was probably just imagining things. But I knew what I had seen I knew that the man was real.
As a huge support, please hit like, subscribe, and maybe share your thought or any experience before going to watch another video. Thank you so much. Have a good day or night, whatever.